Brewing for Bozzos! Like to brew from those who haven't got a clue.
Welcome back to Brewing for Bozzos, the channel where we talk through our process of making half-decent brews with basic equipment. Allegedly. It quickly became apparent while filming the last episode that we haven't exactly used the simplest of recipes to kickstart the channel. In fact, this has been the most complicated recipe we've ever done. Well done us, pat on the back, and it's a miracle that anyone can follow our method when we've got more steps in our process than the Shard in London. As a result, we've decided to video a much simpler walkthrough for our next episode. Less equipment, cheaper ingredients, less filming, less steps, and less of me whittering on like a prat. Less of a headache when editing as well. But as stated in the last episode, we still need to complete our badge of berries. First off, this episode follows on from episode 2, so if you haven't seen that episode, this will make little to no sense. You can watch the episode by clicking the link in the top corner of your screen now, or you can find a link in the description. Conditioning. So after you have successfully fought your way through creating your own beer and it has finished fermenting for a period of 7 days, it's now time to either bottle it or keg it. This is a traditional method of adding natural gas into your beer that has been practiced in this beautiful country for centuries. So, whenever someone from Europe criticises our flavourful and lightly carbonated beer, such as my ex-girlfriend's uncle who stated, "Sie Briten trinken Charles beer, ha 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 ha," you can criticise them back by saying at least we're not pumping our bevy with copious amounts of CO2. And don't take anything from Americans, their beer is as unappealing as their senile president. So how does it work? Priming or racking the beer is the process of kick-starting the yeast for a second fermentation. In order to give the yeast a second wind, as it were, you will need to give it something to work with, i.e. sugar. Lagers, pilsners and wheat beers will obviously require a lot more sugar to create the fizz of a commercial beer, whereas an ale, bitter, stout or porter requires less sugar. Equipment. As stated in episode 2, you will need some additional equipment for the racking process. Firstly, you will need a 5-gallon pressure barrel, or enough bottles to cater to 5 gallons. Bottles tend to be about 500 ml. 5 gallons is equal to 25 litres. Therefore 1 litre is equal to 2 bottles. Therefore 25 litres is equal to 50 bottles. You won't necessarily need the full 50. Due to sediment build-up in the fermenter, we tend to use around 46 to 48. I would advise against bottles, as bottles have the potential to explode if too much priming sugar is used. Next, a siphon. These come in 2 forms. A standard siphon that makes you look as though you're a criminal from the 90s sucking fuel from a car, or the slightly more respectable hand pump siphon. We use the hand pump siphon since it's more hygienic and you are less likely to get a mouthful of bitter fermented wort. And finally, a fridge, or way of cooling the beer to start conditioning. We bought a cheap fridge on Facebook Marketplace for 20 quid, and that does the job perfectly. I wouldn't advise buying electrical equipment from a second-hand source, as you never know if there's a fault with the equipment. But as the saying goes, do as I say, not as I do. Backside covered. Ingredients. For this, you will need some form of sugar to kickstart the process. There are 3 main sugars that you can use: corn sugar, cane sugar, and DME, which is dried malt extract. and they all differ when determining the amount of CO2 that they produce. The following table is easier to see what I mean. This table has come from Homebrew Beer by Greg Hughes, and it is well worth buying if you are just starting out, as it breaks things down in an easy to understand way. So I tend to use a little more than the table states, since I not only keg my beer but I also bottle it afterwards. It means that when the booze goes into the bottles, they still have a slight fizz. If brewing a lager or pilsner, I cut out the keg and condition in the bottles themselves using Cooper's Homebrew carbonation drops. These provide a good amount of CO2 per bottle and cut out having to measure 45 minuscule amounts of sugar. But enough of that, back to the matter at hand. So before we begin, the fundamental thing to remember is to introduce as little oxygen to the beer as possible. If you're splashing around like a toddler in the bath, it is likely to introduce oxygen. This will spoil the finished product, so just don't do it. First, remove the lid from the fermenter and place your pressure barrel on the floor. Insert the siphon, ensuring that the filter of the siphon isn't in the sediment at the bottom. From here you will either need to hand pump the siphon, like we are in the video on screen, or suck on the end of the tubing, creating flow. Once you have a steady flow of beer, you will need to add your sugar. You can just pour it, but it won't dissolve as well, and you'll be adding oxygen as you do it. We remove the siphon and fill up two things: the test tube for the hydrometer and a pint glass. The hydrometer will provide us with our final reading for our alcohol percentage, and the pint glass is to add the sugar into. The hydrometer. From the last video, we said that we had gained a reading of just below 40. The actual reading was 1.042. This first reading is known as the original gravity, or OG. Our second reading is known as the final gravity, FG. This was a bit difficult to read, as you can see in the video, but it came out at 1.006. From here we will need to use this equation. So filling in the figures, 1.042 minus 1.006 is equal to 0.036. You then multiply that by 105. Don't ask me why it's 105, I couldn't tell you. It's just what we do, just accept it. Which gives you 3.78. You then multiply 3.78 by 1.25, and this gives you 4.725% ABV. So based on this equation, we'll end up with a 4.7 ABV porter. I then dissolve 150 grams of granulated sugar into a half pint of beer. Meanwhile, your poor fiancé carries on siphoning the beer into the pressure barrel. Towards the end, the barrel will need to be tipped forward to be able to get the maximum amount of liquid out, whilst leaving the sediment where it is. Once finished, add the sugary wort and hydrometer liquid back in as gently as possible so not to introduce oxygen, and then seal the pressure barrel. It then needs to be put in the fridge. Be careful when doing this, as it will be very heavy. I also have a bad back, which is why I walk like Quasimodo. The beer will then need to stay in the fridge for about 4 to 6 weeks before being bottled. During this time, the flavours and aromas will mature, and we should be left with a nice clean tasting porter with a hint of blackberries and cherries. Periodically, take samples to see how the beer is progressing. I hope that you've enjoyed the episode. And as I said earlier, the irony has not been lost on us that considering we started the channel to make brewing as simple as possible, we have kicked things off with the most complicated recipe we've ever done. So, for the next episode, Laura has created a version of ginger beer but with elderflowers instead of ginger. To tell the truth, you can't get much cheaper than this next one. But if you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a like and subscribe, but hit that big thumbs up because that will really help the channel grow. That's all from us.